All right, we have about 15 minutes to go over Q&A before we just do a final wrap up. So we have 6 presenters here, and we have a lot of questions that you've typed into the chat box. Thanks so much for that. I'll start kind of sequentially with the first presentation to Jennifer and Felipe. First, a few questions about your test design and use of the sensors. So aside from the 2-week co-location with the BAM, the official sensor prior to sampling, did you do any other calibrations to assess the correction? For Jennifer.
Great, yes, hi everyone. Good question. So yeah, we had the 2-week co-location in late February before everything was deployed in Maywood. And then we do have some additional co-location data during the deployment. So some of the sensors were operated alongside a T640 at one of our locations for a portion of the time period that they've been in Maywood. So, we've evaluated that as well. I think that's imperfect. It's a different instrument than was used for the original co-location. But that is one kind of benchmark we have from the time period when data were collected in Maywood. We also have looked at how the sensors have continued to compare to each other during the deployment to, as best we can, try and evaluate consistency there. And we will say that we've seen some unexpected things with some of the sensors, which may suggest, a data quality issue for a particular device here or there, which have then, kind of been withheld from some of what we're looking at. So couple of approaches, not a perfect solution, but, I think potentially once we're thinking about taking the Purple Air, offline and kind of concluding the deployment, we could consider another co-location sort of post-deployment as well.
Great. We also have a question about how did you account for local versus background concentrations? And for instance, did you account for weather like temperature, relative humidity, and winds? And also just packed into the same question, the range of them, has to do with, you think that sometimes these hotspots might be happening because, for instance, a lot of people are washing the sidewalks outside of their retail establishments at around the same time, which might increase the relative humidity. Any talk about those kinds of cofactors?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. So let me start with temperature and RH. So the correction factors and equation that we have used so far did not incorporate temp and RH. I think that's something that we'll explore based on the co-location. If we, have an equation that does incorporate those variables, what impact does that have on our results? So that's still something that's, ahead of us. I think the possibility that, there's sort of a very local impact from sidewalk cleaning and just kind of activities related to businesses is really interesting. That could maybe have multiple impacts, RH being one of them, increasing or decreasing pollution, I guess, depending on what's going on. Some of the hotspots that we've highlighted in this talk were very residential areas, so I don't know that that's the culprit for those particular hotspots, but it's something to explore for other locations. And generally, I guess then how we distinguish local versus, more background type contributions, I think there's a couple of approaches. One thing that a colleague of mine has done with some of the other data that we've collected in Maywood, not the Purple Air, but the PM that was collected by the T640, is a time series based approach for trying to quantify that exact thing. So, local versus background. We haven't yet applied it to the Purple Air, but that's a thought. One of the things that we've done to identify the hotspots that we highlighted in the talk is looking at, for any given Purple Air, what the difference is between its measurements and the sensor-wide average. And that's part of how we identified some of these hotspots and the time periods during the day and, when they were occurring. So that's another approach that we've taken so far.
Great. I wanted to hear Felipe's voice about the community engagement and so on. So there are many questions about this. One of them is, what do you think is the most effective way to engage communities for this kind of research in general, and maybe even during this pandemic?
Well, it's been very hard during the pandemic because we were having twice a month meetings, with the residents. in the houses where we had placed the monitors, the purple air monitors. And since we don't have that anymore, we're now have to have meetings through Zoom. And it's the same thing that I spoke about before, that it's a lot of people don't have access, to the internet. They don't really have the phones that permit you to utilize Zoom. People here use the old flip phones. And we've just had to do a lot of little things to be able to get people to participate. People want to participate, but because of the COVID, we have not been able to do things as we were doing before. But people are really interested because the community that we live with, there's a high knowledge of environmental justice, only because of the different issues that we had, Superfund sites, the freeway, the rail yard, also the density of truck traffic coming through our city, both from the freeway, port traffic, and also from the the city next to us, which is Vernon, a high amount of truck traffic coming through there. So people are really wanting to hear about these things. It was really an incredible project for us to get involved in it. And we were really led by what the community wanted to do. As far as everybody wanted to put a monitor in, but we were limited in the places that we could do it, only because of a lot of the requirements. It doesn't seem to be a big requirement, but people just don't have those things that are required for the monitors. But we were able to get them installed. We've had to change a few of the monitors because people move out. This is a highly transient community. People move in and out. The kids who connect the internet, they move in and out of their parents' house. So those are some of the issues that we've had to deal with, but we continue having dialogue with the people on a constant basis. Just by telephone or by Zoom, we continue talking to people about the results of the purple air monitors. And there's an interest now for monitoring inside the houses. What is the difference? Because we are also impacted by Exide. This is community that's being dug up on a continual basis. Department of Toxic Substance Control is doing the remediation project here. We're located about half a mile from the Exide, and a lot of our houses here have been dug up in the community, and people are really aware that this is going on. This cleanup. It's been about 300 homes so far in the Maywood area that have been cleaned up out of from the lead emitters from Exide.
Excellent. Thank you, Felipe. I want to build on that and ask Jaleesa and Leslie to talk about their community engagement as well. And I'm wondering, what are people demanding as far as action? Once they have this data in hand, how are they trying to affect change? And how successful are they? Just kind of briefly, those big issues.
I can talk on that. So as I mentioned in the presentation, part of our work for the project involved working with graduate classes at Pratt and the New School, and they came up with these urban design and policy sort of mitigation strategies. We also worked with our community development to develop some too. And we have, as an organization, really good relationships with our elected leaders, our state senators and other representatives, and our city council member. But and so we have also met with city departments and things like that, like the Parks Department, Department of Transportation. So some of these asks involve things like doing a traffic study in our community, because our community hasn't had one ever, and it is heavily trafficked, so that's something important. But even rerouting truck traffic, and installing electric buses, there's a very large suite of sort of actions, in addition to improving green infrastructure, which I also mentioned. And so I mean, Jaleesa, if you want to talk about this is kind of something that preceded El Puente, but it has really been a huge success, and I think important in reducing air pollution in our community. But the commercial waste zones bill that was passed in New York City last year was a long environmental justice fight about air quality. Jaleesa, I don't know if you want to jump in on that.
Sure. Yeah, this goes a little bit to what I mentioned briefly in our presentation. about the commercial waste in New York City and how a lot of waste transfer stations are in environmental justice communities. And a lot of the advocacy that happened before El Puente and Nija did the community air mapping project for environmental justice was also just measuring air quality in the community and counting trucks so that we can, show our elected officials that there's an issue here. And so it was just really important gathering that data and it coming from the community and getting the community engaged as well. Because it's not enough when just the community-based organizations know, but when the people in the community feel passionate about this because they were involved in the collecting of the data, it makes for a lot more stronger advocacy around the issue.
Thank you. And I'm going to shift again to Natalie and Karima, asking similar questions related to working with the communities, because it's obviously not just about the sensors, not just about the data, it's about what do people do with the data and what is its intended use. So for Natalie and Karima, I'm thinking, what are the most effective ways of using this information to change people's minds, to change the community's behavior? What do you see?
Karima, I don't know if you're there. If you want to go first.
Yeah, I'm here. For changing the community thinking, it's more of giving them resources or showing them like, hey, there's ways to go about this. They are aware of the situation. They're aware of the health effects of the air pollution in the community, but they feel like their hands are tied, like they can't do anything. They can't advocate for themselves. They don't know who to go to. Or like what roles each elected official or each department, either local or state, plays into the policy making decisions. So that information would help them gain the knowledge, gain the power to speak for themselves. Yeah, go ahead, Dr.
Right.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think what we've found is that when we back away and the youth speak, people listen to them. And so, they've been able to speak to a lot of elected officials. And I think that the power of combining the community science piece and the policy advocacy training for us has been that I think a lot of the students came in thinking they were just going to learn about, the chemistry of particulate matter, or and some of them, that's what they wanted to learn about. But they were really excited, most of them, to report out that they were then able to advocate for, increased air monitoring at the state agency, or vegetative buffers, or they understood what zoning was. And so I think the combination of that, and so, the monitors themselves we use more educationally and as community mobilization. There's other people who called in. I think I saw Catherine Savoy's name, who is working on this locally in Southeast Michigan, who are, I think we're going to be needing to lean on if we really want the students to use that data and share that data. We're really careful with talking to them about the quality of the data, and but they also do things like look at EJ Screen or other tools and other data sets, and so they're just trying to critically think about all of this data side by side, I would say.
Great. So back to Julissa or Leslie. A lot of people are asking about the accuracy of the inexpensive sensors. How important has that been in helping the community understand the air quality and helping them to present their case to the government, local government?
Sure.
Sorry, go ahead, Julissa.
I was just going to say, generally, we use the AirBeam 2, which was evaluated for field performance, and it showed that the AirBeam 2 did produce like measurements that were correlated with reference measurements, and it was well. And then as well as we've also been working with Habitat Map, who creates the AirBeams, and we've come up with a quality control and data plan. And so we've been able to kind of address sometimes if there's data that's really erroneous or doesn't make sense. So just like working with our outside data consultants to make sure, but really I think it's about just engaging the community in general, so that they understand like what's going on and they're able to, you know, just be engaged in this work as well. But I'll let Leslie talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. Also for us, because we're working with Queens College, they work with the city's NICAS system, which is their like community air monitoring, and they use more higher quality, expensive sensors. So the air beams that we use with Queens College were co-located with the sort of more high quality, expensive sensors from the city. And so at the end of our monitoring, they calibrated them, and at the end and beginning, they calibrated them and measured them against the city sensors and found that they were fairly accurate. And again, we also are like doing things through Queens College, like Jaleesa mentioned, on sort of the analysis side of, you know, just making sure that any erroneous sort of out there data is not being counted. Yeah, I think that even if it's like not a perfect tool, it's definitely not. It's really important just to, you know, provide further evidence and for that community engagement piece and really getting people involved in setting their own community. And just like, I think the power of seeing in front of you, like, you know, air pollution levels going up like on a phone, like I've seen in our kids, like they're like, whoa, like that's so, like it just blows their mind. I think that's really important.
Great, thanks. I'm going to give the last question to Felipe, just for a 2-sentence answer if you could, because we do have to wrap it up here. You know, how easy was it for people to understand the data they saw from the sensors? We'll just wrap it up with that. What do you think, Felipe, in a couple of sentences?
It's difficult to explain it because the majority of our people speak only Spanish, so we have to translate all the results, you know, of the study. But once we got into that, it was not that difficult to understand, and that's really what we need: access to more materials in the Spanish language. This is the big need, and I think people have more questions than we have answers for, because since we are having regular meetings to explain, you know, the results of the air monitoring, you know, more questions arise. So, like I said before, you know, people want to now measure everything. We've never had this type of project in the city of Maywood. It's always been more of an activist-oriented community. We've been able to do a lot of things, you know, regarding the issue of the water quality, the pollution coming from Exide. We've had 2 Superfund sites in the city, one small 1.2 square mile city. We have a lot of sources of pollution. So we really want to be able to measure those sources of pollution, how it's affecting people in the houses. And what can we as a community do to begin to respond to those things? You know, get these legislators to listen to what we're doing. This is really, really important because it's really a community-driven project. How do we answer these issues? How do we get involved? How do we make actual changes that will have an effect right now?
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank all you elsewhere. We're all learning from each other. I've seen so many questions that people have typed in. We just kind of barely touched the surface, so we have to rely on each other to help answer these questions as a larger community. Thanks again to all of our speakers. I'm going to turn it over to Sandra Hall of University of California at Davis, just to wrap it up.
Thank you, Ethan, and thank you.
Here we go.
Thank you. Thank you for everybody who was able to attend and all the great questions that came out. Just to reiterate, in case you couldn't hear what Ethan was saying, we're going to take all of these extra questions and we are going to have the presenters provide answers on their own to them, and then we will be posting them on our website. As attendees, you will get an email that shares this information and where to see the additional questions answered. Thank you again to all of our presenters, and thank you to Ethan for moderating, and thank you to you as attendees for making this a very interactive session. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you.